Hey there, history nerds and curious weirdos. Welcome to Naked History, the show that digs deep into the dusty underbelly of the past. And this time, we mean that very literally, because today we're heading beneath the streets of Paris. No, not for an artisanal espresso or a secret jazz club, but to explore a shadowy world of skull-lined walls, illegal raves, forgotten tunnels, and 6 million very dead Parisians. This is a story of the Paris Catacombs, a strange fusion of Enlightenment, urban planning, medieval chaos, and modern-day urban legends. So buckle up, and maybe bring a flashlight, possibly a rosary, and maybe even a map. Actually, scratch the map. It's not going to work for us down here. So let's go ahead and head down. So let's set the scene. Late 18th century Paris, France is just a few guillotines away from full-blown revolution. The Enlightenment is challenging old ways of thinking, and the city, it stinks. Literally. Because Paris has a problem. Several, actually, but one of the most pressing, dead bodies. For centuries, Parisians have been burying their dead in cemeteries right in the heart of the city. Chief among them, the Cemetery of the Innocents, which has been in use for over 600 years to this point. Now, over time, these cemeteries had become grotesquely overstuffed. Graves were reused, bodies were layered like some grotesque and macabre lasagna, and if you lived nearby, chances were high that your basement might leak more than just rainwater. "Oh, bonjour, I see your wine cellar is currently fermenting in corpses again." By the late 1760s, things had gotten so bad that the walls near the Les Halles actually started collapsing under the weight of the decomposing dead. Entire neighborhoods reeked of rot. Health officials and engineers began to panic. The cemeteries were officially deemed a public health hazard, and something had to be done. And as luck, or macabre ingenuity would have it, Paris already had an underground network perfect for storing millions of bones. Beneath this city of lights lies something much darker, a sprawling labyrinth of ancient limestone quarries dating back to Roman times. These quarries were mined for centuries to build much of the city above, but had largely been abandoned by the 18th century. And they were enormous. We're talking over 200 miles of tunnels and chambers, many unmapped, some unstable. Think of it as the city's forgotten skeleton, just waiting to house someone else's. In 1777, King Louis XVI, yes, the one with the eventual head separation issue, authorized the Inspection Générale des Carrières, a new agency to inspect and secure the quarries. And then in 1785, authorities began the Great Relocation of the Dead. From sacred ground to stone tunnel, from churchyard to catacomb, from cemetery to city storage. Honestly, this is the only time in history where just put the corpses in the basement was a state-approved policy. The relocation began at night. Priests in black cassocks led candlelit processions of carts piled with bones, chanting prayers over the remains. It was a surreal and somber ritual. For the next 2 years, bones from the Cemetery of the Innocents were exhumed and transferred into the underground quarries. Eventually, other overflowing cemeteries across Paris followed suit. But here's the kicker. They didn't just drop the bones into piles. In 1810, Louis-Étienne Hircart de Thury, head of the Paris Mine Inspection Service, decided to organize the catacombs into what he called an ossuary monument. Translation, let's stack these femurs artfully and make an aesthetic skull pyramid. For ambience. And that's exactly what they did. The bones were arranged in decorative patterns, rows upon rows of tibias, skulls lining walls like grotesque wallpaper, even heart-shaped bone mosaics. Yes, really. It turned death into an exhibit. This was no longer just a storage solution. It became something deeper. Visitors began touring the ossuary as early as the 1800s. Writers and thinkers of the Romantic period saw it as a place to meditate on morality. Victor Hugo, Charles Baudelaire, even Napoleon reportedly took a peek. It's weird how a pile of bones can make you feel both humble and immortal at the same time. At its entrance, a sign was placed above the stairway. Arriete, c'est ici l'empire de la mort. Or, stop, this is the empire of death. Imagine descending a spiral staircase into the bowels of the earth, the air turning cool and dry, the light fading from flickering torchlight, and that's the first thing you see. Not welcome, not mind the step. Nope, just a casual reminder that you are now in the domain of death itself. Very inviting. But that's the vibe. You're not in Disneyland. This was meant to inspire reflection, to create a space where the physical reality of death could be faced square in the skull socket. The Enlightenment thinkers of the era, for all of their obsession with reason and progress, still held a kind of morbid reverence for the finality of morality. And so the catacombs were not hidden, they were curated. Once inside, visitors would pass through narrow, dimly lit tunnels flanked by geometric arrangements of bones. Walls of skulls stared blankly back. Some are stacked so perfectly that they seem like masonry. Others form symbols, crosses, hearts, columns, aesthetic, symbolic, and deeply, deeply eerie. It's the only place where you can say, nice pattern work on that tibia wall, and not be considered completely unhinged. But what may surprise you is that this, again, wasn't just a careless dumping ground. Far from it. Louis Etienne wasn't just a bureaucrat. He was a mining inspector, yes, but also a scientist, a philosopher, and a bit of a necro-aestheticist, if you will. He believed the ossuary should not just be functional, but meaningful. So he designed it like a monument, lining the walls with epigraphs and moralistic inscriptions about the brevity of life, the certainty of death, and the futility of earthly pleasures. These weren't written in some dusty Latin either, coming from someone who speaks and reads a little bit of that dusty Latin. They were legible to the common Parisian in French, short, punchy phrases like, "Think in the morning that you may die before evening," or "Here lies the proof that all men are equal." Basically, the 18th century version of Live, Laugh, Love, if it were written by Edgar Allan Poe on a bad day. Now, it's grim, yeah, but oddly comforting, too. And there's an honesty to it. You walk through this space and realize, wow, no one gets out of this alive. Not kings, not revolutionaries, not even that one guy who invented mayonnaise. We all end up in the same spot. Now, here's a cool twist. The catacombs weren't just symbolic, they were scientific gold mines. In the 19th century, early anthropologists and comparative autonomists used the catacombs to study skull shapes and human remains from different eras. You had everything from medieval monks to 18th century revolutionaries buried down there. And you could tell. Many of the bones bear the scars of how those people lived and died. There's evidence of syphilis, scurvy, battle wounds, and a surprising number of people with really, really bad teeth. Fun fact, flossing wasn't exactly trending during the reign of Louis XV, which explains why some of the jawbones look like dental horror stories. It was also during this time that the catacombs became a favorite stop for medical students and even curious tourists. Yes, tourism. In the 1800s, guided tours were already a thing, but only for the well-connected. Now, over the years, access became more public. Today, 500,000 people or more descend into the catacombs each year through a single, heavily regulated public entrance in the 14th District. But remember, you're only seeing about 1 mile of what's down there. The rest? Well, that's where the real stories begin. So, the official, government-sanctioned catacombs tour is fascinating. It's chilling, it's well-lit, it has an exit. But it's just the tip of the bony iceberg. Because beyond the ticket booth and security guard lies the real catacombs. Hundreds of miles of forbidden, unmapped, and often unstable tunnels spiderwebbing beneath the city. This is the realm of the cataphiles, urban explorers who, for decades, have defied French law to wander, map, and inhabit the off-limit sections of the catacombs. Some do it for art, some for the thrill, some for the eerie silence. And some just want a place to throw the weirdest underground party in Western Europe. Let's back up a bit. In the 1980s and 90s, cataphile culture exploded. Young Parisians armed with headlamps in vague directions started entering through abandoned quarries, metro vents, and even sewer shafts. Once inside, they'd navigate the tunnels through spray-painted codes, makeshift maps, and something called the breadcrumb method, which is just as sketchy as it sounds. Now, if you're relying on stale baguette chunks to find your way out of a bone maze, you've probably already made a series of questionable life choices. One of the most famous stories came in 2004 when a police training exercise uncovered a secret chamber near the Trocadero. Inside, a fully operational cinema clandestine, or clandestine cinema. There was a screen carved into the rock wall, tiered stone seating for 20, a bar, a fully wired electrical system, and a functioning popcorn machine. Yes, a popcorn machine. Even the French know that movie nights demand snacks. And the police were stunned. They left to gather reinforcements, but when they returned days later, the entire cinema had been stripped bare. Just one thing remained. A note that said, Ne cherchez pas, or don't search. Now, this is either a secret society of cinephile vampires or one of the coolest group chats in all of Paris. Cataphiles have since reported everything from impromptu underground concerts to illegal art galleries to candlelit dinners beside ancient skull stacks. Some even document their adventures and post maps, though this has become a controversial topic within the community. Why? Well, because the more people know, the more likely it is someone gets hurt or lost. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. The catacombs aren't just spooky fun in indie films in the underworld. They're dangerous. People have gotten lost and died. The tunnels are pitch black. Many of them are flooded, blocked, or prone to collapse. And phone service? Forget it. You're lucky if your flashlight doesn't flicker like the horror movie cliché. Now, there's the infamous case of Philibert Espiert, a doorman who vanished in 1793, and his remains weren't discovered until 1804, over a decade later, just a few feet from an exit. To this day, no one knows how he got lost why he couldn't find his way out, or what he experienced in those final hours. And even modern cataphiles aren't immune. In 2017, two teenagers spent 3 days lost underground before being rescued by a special police unit and search dogs. They were cold, dehydrated, and unsurprisingly, a little traumatized. The lesson? The Empire of Death doesn't do guest lists. Respect it or get swallowed. Now let's talk legend. Because when you mix skulls, tunnels, and centuries of history, you will get ghost stories, and conspiracy theories, and some things that sound like urban myths, but aren't entirely implausible. There are stories of secret cult rituals performed deep in the off-limit zones, whispered tales of phantom voices, footsteps that follow you, and lights that flicker without explanation. Nazi soldiers also used sections of the catacombs during their occupation of Paris in World War II, constructing secret bunkers for intelligence operations. Now, oddly enough, bunkers and artifacts have been found in underground areas, including swastika markings and rusted communications equipment. And one of the most particular rumors of the Paris Catacombs comes from the story of the lost video camera. Supposedly, a group of explorers found a camcorder in the tunnels, its footage showing a lone man getting increasingly panicked as he wandered deeper and deeper, eventually dropping the camera and disappearing into the darkness. No body was ever found, and the footage made its way to a documentary crew, somehow miraculously finding and sharing the footage. Now, if you do film a found footage horror movie, maybe don't go full method. Today, the catacombs walk the line between sacred site and tourist attraction. The ossuary is carefully maintained. The bones are inspected, cleaned, and rearranged as needed. Guards patrol the official areas to prevent vandalism and theft. Yes, bone theft is very much a real thing. Now, visitors file through respectively. Some snap selfies, others go quiet, awing at the scene in front of them. A few leave tokens, some notes, flowers, or coins. And it's weird, isn't it? You're surrounded by 6 million former people. Each femur once held up a leg that danced or marched or kicked a can. Every skull had a face, laughed, argued, drank wine, felt fear. And we've reduced them to bones, but they were lives. And that's the strange, poetic contradiction of the Paris Catacombs. They're haunting, but not haunted. Grim, but not without grace. They're a reminder that history isn't always made by kings and battles. Sometimes it's whispered in the silence of stone and memory. So, in summary, what are the catacombs? They are a cemetery, yes, but not like any you've ever seen. A monument, but not one built in the open. They're a whisper in stone, a paradox, a place where death isn't hidden away, sanitized, or buried beneath neat little headstones. It's put right in your face, lined up, cataloged, labeled, on display. And somehow, it doesn't feel disrespectful. Not quite. There's a strange kind of dignity in it. These bones aren't tossed aside, they're stacked carefully, lovingly, and even artistically. Like the city is saying, we remember you, even if we don't know your name, which is more than a lot of us get. The catacombs are a symbol of how a society deals with death when it has no more room for it. When the past literally spills into the present. When the streets above are built on centuries of living and dying and repeating the cycle again. They're a time capsule without a key. A civic solution wrapped in spiritual reflection. A place that reminds you you're not immortal, even if your selfie there might be. Now, real quick, let's talk about the ethics of all of this. Because we've turned this mass grave into a museum, a gift shop, an Instagram hotspot. Is that okay? It's not a new question. Philosophers, historians, and Parisians themselves have wrestled with this for decades. Is it voyeuristic to walk through here as a tourist? To post your selfie with a caption like Bon Voyage or Skull in It in Paris? That last one is a felony in about 14 moral jurisdictions, by the way. But here's the nuance. The catacombs were always meant to be seen, not gawked at, but witnessed. The Enlightenment thinkers who shaped this ossuary weren't trying to hide death. They were trying to make us look at it, understand it, and accept it. And in a weird way, the act of visiting them is a continuation of that mission. If you walk through them and come out thinking just a little bit more about your place in the world, or feeling just a little bit more connected to the people who came before, then maybe the bones are doing their job. Maybe remembering is the most respectful thing we can do. So, what comes next for the catacombs? Well, the city of Paris continues to protect and preserve the official ossuary. New security measures, structural reinforcements, temperature control, digital archiving of inscriptions. There is even talk of extending the visitor route, but cautiously. Now, as for the unofficial catacombs, they remain wild, unregulated, risky, and deeply alluring. Cataphiles still explore, still map, and still meet in hushed forums to swap coordinates like treasure hunters. Some advocate for more legal recognition. Others want it to remain an outlaw world, untouched by the regulation of tourism. There are even growing communities of artists who see the catacombs not just as a playground for thrill seekers, but as a canvas, the underground world for murals, sculptures, and installations. All temporary, but all legal. All part of the living history of the space. The tension between preservation and freedom, respect and curiosity, legality and legend, it's all still playing out, just beneath the surface. Literally. All right. Before we close this lantern-lit chapter, I want you to imagine something. It's the late 1800s. You're walking alone down a cobblestone street in Montparnasse. Gas lamps flicker overhead. The city is quiet. You come to a nondescript door. It creaks open, and a guide with a lantern beckons. You descend a tight, spiral staircase. Down, down, down. The air cools. The light dims. The silence grows thicker. Then, as you step forward, your eyes adjust, and you see them. Bones. Bones everywhere. Walls of skulls. Leg bones stacked like lumber. Signs quoting philosophers. Shadows that stretch longer than they should. Death is all around you. But somehow, you're not afraid. You feel calm. Because this place isn't just about endings, it's about memory and the weight of history and what it means to live in a city where the past is never buried too deep. The catacombs don't just remind us that we all will die. They remind us that we are part of something bigger, a story that continues even after we're gone. Thanks for walking the bone-lined corridors of the past with me, folks. If this episode didn't give you the chills, I recommend checking your pulse. You might already be a part of the catacombs. I'm Dyllan Gasaway, and this has been Naked History, the show that's never afraid to go 6 million bones deep in the name of curiosity. Be sure to subscribe, share, and leave a review if this episode tickled your skull-shaped funny bone. Don't forget to check out our debrief episode. We'll all dig up some creepy catacomb extras, some fun facts that didn't make the main cut, and a brief history of 18th century Parisian funeral fashion. Spoiler, velvet was huge. Until next time, stay curious, stay weird, and don't go wandering off in tunnels without telling your friends. Have a good one.